tree goes according to the Seder of Daf Yomi. And what's the next Masechta in there? Rosh Hashanah. Oh, so that's it? Yeah. Because the big ones don't go in the proper order. It's Beitza and then Rosh Hashanah. I mean, it's obviously arbitrary, but it's next Masechta is Rosh Hashanah. Okay, we are on Daf Yud Gimel Alf. As of tonight, by the way, we will be 23 blot behind, which means we've actually caught up about 10 blot in the past a month or two. So actually, since Shkolim is 31 blot, so we're really ahead, but we have to take Pesach into account at this point. So it's working out so far. Okay, we and our branch here in Minneapolis is going to do very well. The guy got a message from the guy that likes the tapes. I haven't heard anything from London. All right, we are in the Daf Yud Gimel, the new Perek, Halach Aleph, Perek Yud Gimel. Ain't Soni Dogim Mina Bivrin. You're not allowed to hunt down fish from a fish pond, because the general principle is whenever something is already in a restricted area, so then you're allowed to take it on Yontif and slaughter it, right? Or in case of fish, eat it. But if the fish are in a fish pond, that's not considered to be restricted area, because that's how fish live. Beinos of name Mizonos, and similarly, since they are not, because they're said to be domesticated when they're in the water, so therefore you can't feed them either. But one is allowed to hunt down a chaya, an animal, or an oaf, a bird, nina bibarim, from pens which enclose them. Because in that case, it's really considered to be an enclosure vis-a-vis the animal, so therefore it's as if it's already trapped, and that's why you're allowed to take the animal for their yontif. And similarly, since it's already domesticated, no you can feed them. Obviously, it depends on the size of the pen. Not all pens are equivalent. Zach, general principle, anything which is lacking hunting down, meaning it's not completely considered trapped yet, also it's forbidden to take that animal on yontif. If it's not lacking trapping, then it is mutter. And the one is going to ask, why use the language of Osir and Mutter? You should use the language of Chayiv and Potter, because say there's a Malacha D'Oraisa is forbidden, or D'Oraisa on Shabbos and Yontif, so the language should be Chayiv and Potter, not Mutter and Osir. The Gemara will address that. What? Yeah, Skila. Not Yontif. Yontif is only a lav. Or Malacha Yontif is only a lav. China said, Masisid Lok Rabbi Yehuda, our mission is not like Rabbi Yehuda. The three Torah we learned over there. Rabbi Yehuda made outside Tzipor Lamigdal. If somebody captures a bird in a tower with tzvila bayis and a deer into a house, chayav. Well, it sounds like it has to be in a very restricted area. It has to be in a tower, which is really a closet. The word migdal, although it means tower, is like a closet. Like you have in Israel, the closets which are freestanding and are aron means closet, but right, and those are freestanding closets, right? That's really what it is. So you have it in that closet, or a tzvila bayis, or a deer, at least into a house, it's chayiv. Gina bibor, butter. But if it's in a gino or a bibor, then if you catch the animal, you trap it in a gino or a bibor, then you're exempt. Now, if you're exempt and you catch it in a gino or bibor, that means gino or bibor is not considered to be trapped. And the converse of that is that if that's not considered to be trapped, so then you would not be allowed to take an animal from one of these enclosures on Yontif in order to supply yourself with meat. Right? So therefore, our mission, which allows you to take one of these enclosures, because it's already considered to be trapped in the enclosure, that must be not like Rabbi Yehuda. Says more further, now skip the next 3 lines, Korbaneda takes them out. We have a contradiction, Rabbanan. When we learned of the Chachomim say, Tzipor Lamigdal, when you have a bird in a tower, the closet, Utzvila Gino, or the deer in a garden, Ulechotzer, or a yard, Ubivarim, and a bivor is considered all to be caught. And we learned, however, In our Mishnah, it just mentions biborim. It doesn't mention chotzer and gina. It says if it's in a bibor, it's okay. We also have name mazonos, and therefore you can also give them for food when they're in the bibor, because that's considered to be domesticated. But it sounds like ligina or lichotzer. The korban change. It's migina or michotzer. Lo, you're only allowed to take it from a bivor, not from an enclosure, not from a gina or a chotzer. So how do we reconcile our Mishnah, which seems only to recognize it being trapped in a bivor, with this brisa, which seems to recognize it being considered trapped even in a gina or a garden or a chotzer or a courtyard? So first of all, Glanza gives an interesting answer, and the Gemara will immediately reject it. Kan b'chotzer makura, kan b'chotzer shein makura. Depends if it has a roof or not. If the chotzer has a roof, then it's considered to be caught in there, even if it's a chotzer, a courtyard, and not a bivor, not an enclosure made for the purpose of corralling an animal. Even a chotzer, if it has a roof, it's considered to be corralled. Shein makura, kan b'chotzer shein makura. If it has no roof, then it's not to be corralled there. Says Gemara, wait a minute. I don't understand how you can say that. But tina and gina. In a chotzer, we have chatzeros which are enclosed. A mall is an enclosed chotzer, right? But you never have a gina which is enclosed. They didn't have the concept of atriums back then, right? So you don't have an enclosed garden. There's no such thing. So how can you draw a dichotomy between enclosures and non-enclosures by a garden? It doesn't work. Did you ever hear of enclosed garden? This really was what we said in the Mishnah. Depends how large it is. Sometimes the gina and chotzer are very small, and then when it's in the gina or chotzer, that's considered to be caught. Sometimes the gina and chotzer are very large, and then it's not considered to be caught when it's in the gina or chotzer. Okay? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Ula Amar. Rabbi Ula said, "Bon kumi Rabbi Yacha." They asked in front of Rabbi Yacha, "Ma nisnei." What should we say? Should we say like it says in Mishnah, Osir and Mutter? Remember, I told you it would be an issue, or should we say called Mechusar Tzeda Chayav? If you have not yet caught it before Yontif and you catch on Yontif, you're chayiv. B'shein mechusar tzeidah, if it's not lacking tzeidah, if you did catch for Yontif, but you're exempt. Amar lon, so he said, no. Aren't we talking about a case where you already locked it in? Now, this is a very interesting thing Gemara is saying. Gemara is saying, look, the bottom line is, as long as it's in a locked bivor, a locked corral or enclosure before Yontif began, or Shabbos began even though it might not be considered nitzo d'Rabbanan, because it has a large room to roam, but as long as it's under lock somewhere, that's considered to be sufficiently trapped that you won't transgress the Issur D'Oraisa of Tzeidah. We're talking about at the Rabbanan level, what's considered to be not just caught, figured literally, but also what is considered to be sufficiently muchan. Because remember, Masechus Beitza is really Masechta about muchan. So that which is muchan, and that which is muchan, prepared to eat, has to be something which is in more narrower confines. So therefore he said, that's why, Elokah Mechusar Tzeidah Asur, that which is lacking Tzeidah is forbidden. Shein Mechusar Tzeidah, that which is not lacking Tzeidah is mutter, is permissible. Again, we're talking about the D'Rabbanan of Muktzah, not the D'Oraisa of actual Tzeidah. As long as it's under lock in the corral, no matter how large it is, that's considered to be ois, no longer in the category of Tzeidah D'Oraisa. Rabbi Shmuel said, Achui de Rabbi Brechia. Rabbi Shmuel, the brother of Rabbi Brechia, said, Koshem Mechusim Yishabim. Now, I think he's explaining the previous Gemara, and he's saying, although the Mefarshim don't make it clear, anytime it's lacking nets, Mechusar Tzeidah. Because if you need a net to catch it, obviously it's in the wild, the only way you can catch it is by a net or a trap. That's considered to be not hunted down yet. She'ena Mechusar Nisham, which is not lacking nets, meaning it doesn't need a net to trap it. She'ena Mechusar Tzeidah, it's not considered to be lacking trapping, and therefore even if it's in a large enclosure, since you don't need a net, you just run it down until you finally get it. So therefore it's considered to be sufficiently caught that it's not an Issur D'Oraisa on Shabbos, only an Issur D'Rabbanan to use it in order to eat from, because it's not considered to be fully prepared.
How about closing the door?
The door must be closed.
No, this seems to be saying that the standard is net versus not net rather than door.
Right.
So those could be that the door is closed, but there's no net present to be able to capture the animal.
No, if you need a net, then it's Issur D'Oraisa. If you don't need a net, it's Issur D'Rabbanan. Even though you'll need some other tool in order to trace it down.
So it could be that if the door is closed, you won't need a net.
Right. Because nets are generally associated with actually trapping animals in the wild. You have nets which spring from trees and nets which catch them in the ground. So that's actually the type of net we're talking about. Not like a butterfly net, not like something which you pull down over its head, but rather a trapping net. Okay? Bear in mind, we can't use most traps because they'll trape up an animal. You can't use a bear trap on a deer because who knows what it'll do. So really the only kinds of traps which we can actually use in hunting is the net. It's a famous tshuva, the Nabi Yehuda. Nabi Yehuda was asked by an Austro-Hungarian Jewish nobleman. He asked him, am I allowed to go hunting with my Goyish friends? So he said, listen, I'll pidin, I can't ask it for you. But look, what is hunting for a nice Jewish boy? Esau was the hunter. Yaakov was the Ishtam Yoshev Ohalim. What kind of business is this? You're going to go and be cruel to animals for sport? Right? You can't eat them once you hunt them. So therefore, he said, although it's not technically halachically forbidden, it should nevertheless not a proper Jewish thing, kind of like competitive team sports. Okay, it says the Gemara further.
You always use a tranquilizer.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know if they had that back in 18th century Prague. Maybe. It says the Gemara further. Sholti minan nagarim. One is allowed to slaughter animals from a nagar. Now, a nagar is kind of the same thing as a beaver. It's a different word for it. The word nagar means it has a water source in it, like a flowing nigar. Nigar means something which drips or flows. So there's a water source usually in the beaver for the animals, of course, to get watered on.
What's the word for carpenter? Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's
also carpenter, right? Nagar, but nagar has many meanings. What can I tell you? I'm not sure where the word nagar for carpenter actually comes from. I don't know. But nagar for water, nahar, I think the Korban brings down a pasuk even here. Maybe I'm making that up. But he doesn't say. He doesn't bring down a pasuk. But I think somebody actually brought down a pasuk. But it's similar to nagar is like nahar. So ein shulchti lo mina mechmoros lo mina metzudos. However, one cannot slaughter an animal when one finds it in a trap. Mechmoros are one type of trap, and metzudos another type of trap. If you find them on Yontif. Now, according to Korban, the reason you can't shechli, you find them in a trap on Yontif is because maybe they weren't muchan from before Yontif. Maybe they're just trapped on Yontif itself, right? You went out to the forest and checked your traps and found an animal there. You don't know it was there before Yontif, so maybe it was caught on Yontif, but it's forbidden. The Yerushalmi Mavur gives a slightly different reason. He says that the traps those days were not so efficient. And it was easy to get out of the traps, or not so easy, I guess, but it was possible. So therefore, an animal which is in a trap is not considered to be fully caught. When it's in an enclosure, it can't work itself loose, so therefore it's considered to be caught. But when it's in the trap, it's not fully, if it fights a lot, I guess it can get out, so therefore it's not considered to be fully trapped yet. Rabbi Ami said, "B'mitzarta de shisia." I don't know exactly what this net looks like. It's a net which is made out of shesi, certain types of thread. Shesi thread, not Arab threads. Shesi threads are generally softer, weaker threads. So I guess that it's possible for the animal to get out. It's more likely for the animal to get out. That's the way the Yerushalmi Beitza explains it. Shmuel Martzaru bepitom. Shmuel says, if it's caught in a pitom, which is another type of trap, I forget what kind of trap that is, then the Korban says a place where you fatten birds for the kill. So a pitom lefatein means like the fattened geese. So if you have it in a fattening pen, so that's considered to be properly caught from before Yontif. Rav Amar Sukkot de Nahara Shari. If you have a dam in the river where the fish are, so then you're allowed to take the fish which are behind the dam. Rabbi Yehuda said Behu de Tasim. It's with one with two boards. Now means the dam has to have a board in front and a board in back, because otherwise the fish can swim upstream and get out. So it has to have a double dam. One to keep the fish in on one side, the other keep the fish on the other side. How do the fish get in there? I guess they're stupid. Somehow they manage to get in and not get out. Like the bees who get into the traps and sukkahs, they manage to get in and not get out. So here too, somehow the fish get in and don't get out, and that's considered to be sufficiently caught for purposes of Yontif. Okay, Mitzudas Chayev Ofos V'Dogim. If you have traps of Chayos, Ofos, and Dogim, animals, birds, and fish, Shasam Erev Yontif, you made them on Erev Yontif. Lo Yitel Mehem Yontif, you may not take from them animals on Yontif. Only Ken Yodesh Nitzol Mi Bod Yom, unless you know the animals were actually in the nets from before Yontif began. Ma'aseh Ba'akom Echad Shevi Dogim on Gamliel. So Ma'aseh son Goya brought fish to Gamliel on Yontif. V'Amar, and he said, Mutorim Mehem, I'm allowed to take them. El Shein Ritzoni L'Kabli Men, I just don't want to take them from him. He wanted to be machmir on himself, whether it was because he didn't want to take from a goy, a matana, or because he didn't want people to think that this was Austin Yontif was doing. Nonetheless, it doesn't say, but he didn't want to take them. Says more, Mimotia, how do you know it was caught before Yontif? Who's going to tell you it was caught before Yontif? Says more, Im Niskalkol Mitsuda. They used to make the way the Bavli actually describes it. They used to have very long nets. You should stretch for miles across the forest. Not miles, literally, but these are stretched for a long time. So even though you didn't check the entire net on Yontif, if you went before Yontif begins, you went before Yontif and you saw that there was tension in the wires, that there was something which seemed to be awry, it wasn't as was normally strong. So that's a good indication that there's something caught further down. And you can rely on that, and then the next day when you go and check the nets more closely and you find an animal there, you can actually eat that animal. It's considered to be caught before Yontif. Okay? If the net was not ruined for him before Yontif, so then they were not caught before Yontif began. Listen, guys, even if the Mitzuda is ruined, asked the Gemara, even if it's already seems to be sprung, how do you know? How do you know that there actually was caught before Yontif? Maybe it's time the net got ruined. How do you know that it's because of something got caught in there? So it says, maybe a rock fell on it, maybe a tree, who knows? It's where you string the net in the forest, and in the forest, obviously there are lots of animals, so you assume, I guess, the rove is the majority of the reasons why this trap would be sprung. Would be animals, so therefore you can rely on that. If you see the trap sprung, ruined, so to speak, before Shabbos or Yontif, you can assume that it's an animal further down, and when you find it the next day, you can take it. You should know that this is talking about a case where you spread the nets in the forest. The thing we learned, dogim. We mentioned fish. The dogim lo mokum shemitzuyin. Fish, where you string nets for them, is it not where they're to be found? So here too, here too, you strung the net in a place where there are lots of birds and animals. Rabbi Zia B'Shem Rav said, I remember they wanted to say, Mutarin L'machar. Now, this is talking about a case where a guy brings in something a yontif. So we wanted to say that, they wanted to say that it's only mutter the next day. If the guy brings in something yontif, so you can use it the next day, and you don't, and it is also for that day, but it's mutter the next day. So what's the chiddush? That's okay. What's the next day? Obviously, the next day is a weekday. What's portion? It's mutter the next day. Means you're allowed to accept it from him on yontif to eat it the next day. Okay, they thought that the chiddush was not that you're allowed to eat what the guy brings in yontif, but you're allowed to accept it from him and then only eat it the next day. So the chiddush of our Mishnah is that you don't have to send it back like Rabbi Gamliel did. So it says the Gemara, Rabbi Chizkiah and Rabbi Zia braid Rabbi Chunia, the Bras Chavron, they said Mutar Mamish. They said, no, when a guy brings something a yontif, it's literally mutar immediately on that day. Sovereign Meimar, so they wanted to say that the reason why that is true is that Sfeikon Hitiru, if you have a Savik or something from prepared from before Yontif or not, they don't know if it was prepared, and certainly something which a guy brings, you don't know if it was prepared for Yontif. So it's mutar. A Savik, it's only Savik the Rabbanon, though Kansav Achon is only the Rabbanon, so therefore they were makel. Rabbi China, Rabbi Yonasan, Treyonomi, they both said, Savik Hachin Aser. You know, not sure if something was prepared before Yontif or not, it's forbidden. Rabbi Yechon Amar, Savik Hachin Mutar. Savik, whether something's prepared, it's mutar. Rabbi Chia and Rabba, Rabbi the Great, Rabbi Shimon Rebbe, and Rabbi Shimon the son of Rebbe, Chadamar once said a much more interesting chiddush. He said, well, actually, the second one is more chesh. One said, Akum tzorech achein, that even a goy has to prepare stuff for him before Yom begins. And if he doesn't, so it's considered to be also, but I guess in the suffix you'd have to be machmir. But Chayramar, the other said, the other said, Ein Akum tzorech achein. I saw a beautiful pshat in this Yerushalmi Beitza. He says that a goy doesn't need to be al-chana. By Yidden, by Jews, so they're maktzeh their das from certain things. Things which they figure are not going to be mutar and yotiv, they're not going to use on yotiv. So there's migol diskatzoi ben hashmoshus diskatzoi l'kul but once was unsuitable ben hashmoshus, so it's unsuitable the rest of the day. But by goyim, what concept do they have of something being awesome for them for any amount of time, right? They have no concept of muktzah. So therefore there's no concept of achona by them either, right? Since there's no concept of prohibited days, no concept ever of anything being removed, which is muktzah means, and therefore anything God brings you is by default considered to be mucha. It's a fascinating concept. Of course, if he did a malacha to bring it to you, such as, he cut it, chopped it off a tree, that's something else. But if all he did is just brought it to you and you had no das about it, so then there's no problem in actually accepting it from him. According to this opinion, that there's no problem, akum einot tzorech achein. It's a beautiful svara. So it says the Gemara, we didn't know who said what. Which one Rabbi Chia Rabba said, and which one Rabbi Shimba Rabbi said. Since Rav wanted to come, or is supposed to come, before Rabbi Chia Rabba. Bitukme means to stand before Rabbi Chia Bar Rabba. He was supposed to come one day, and he came late. And Rabbi Chia said to him, "Hey Navisa, where were you?" And Rav responded, "Shayarto havas avra." There was a caravan passing by. And I ate from it figs. And it was yontif. It must be that Rabbi Chia held that Goyim's food does not require special preparation, because obviously Rav was coming to Rabbi Chia and told him he ate the dates. That would be very not nice if Rabbi Chia held the dates were also, right? So it must be that Rabbi Chia is the one who holds that the caravan of Goyim, which brings dates, even though you had no thought of actually these dates coming from before Shabbos, or Yontif, when they come, you're allowed to consume them. Okay, so he doesn't need achana. I said dates, it's figs actually.
That these figs were picked on Yontif?
We don't assume that was a caravan. Okay. It might even be dried figs. No. All right?
What about it? Came from Chum?
No, but since they're going to bring it for themselves, it's not a problem. It's only if he does the malachas. Even if you're cutting off the tree, it's only if he cuts off the tree specifically for you. If he cuts off the tree for himself, that's
like
okay.
Guy making coffee.
In the hotel, sure. Okay? Says Mar, in Florida, you went to a hotel, were you? Okay. Says Mar, I was wondering if that was on your mind. Says Gemara, says Gemara, Chad Talmid min the Rabbi Sami. A certain student, Rabbi Sami, also Lanteus. He went to city of Lanteus. I know what it is. Isolate Durmskana. They brought him some sort of food called Durmskana. Somebody says what it is. What it is not germane to our discussion. So they brought him the Durmskana of Achal, and he ate it. So we see that it must be that Rabbi Simbai holds that Akum Ein Tzarech Achein, doesn't require Achana. Asa Chad Talmid Rabbi Yerushalmi Levi, also Tabon. So one of the students, Yerushalmi Levi, went there. Isolate Durmskana. They brought him Durmskana v'loachal. He wouldn't eat. Asa v'amar kumi Rabbi, and he told his Rabbi Yerushalmi Levi, that there was this Talmid Rabbi Simai who was eating. So Amar, so Rabbi Yerushalmi Levi said, "Do not kashitas Rabbi." This is like he holds like his Rabbi, the Rabbi Simai Amar, Ein Akum Tzrichim Alchein. They don't need preparation. Rabbi Yerushalmi Levi said, "Dam nios shebekerem arelu suros." Now, dam nios are some sort of a growth, some sort of fruit which grows in the vineyards, and when they grow there, they're also called kilaim, because they're not the same as grapes. And obviously there's some forward something which makes kilaim, and they're forbidden. I don't know if they're also banoah like kilei akarim. I don't think so. It's not a type of grain. It means that if they grow in the vineyard, it's like kilei zroim or kilei ilan, and you must uproot them. Okay? Rav Chuna b'Shem Rav said, Hashitim Shabakipim, however, a very poor type of date, which is basically considered to be like a thorn bush. So if they grow together, the shitim are. Yeah, so if they grow together with regular palm trees and regular dates, they're permitted because they're very similar. So damanios, I guess, have some similarity to grapes, but not enough to make them mutter. Maybe it's like cherries, because something similar to grapes, you know what I mean? So therefore, if they grow together, it's kilayim, because they're not exactly the same fruit.
An Israeli song that has the word damdamios in it. Damdamios, yeah, I think you're right.
They know everything. It's remarkable.
What a team.
Okay. Is this from the 40s? From the 50s?
Much later.
So Rav Chuna V'Shem Rav said, Shoshana Damari is going back. Rav Chuna V'Shem Rav said, Hashitza Shevakiva. I don't know the songs, but I know the history. Hashitza Shevakiva Ha'Reilim Mutarim. The Shitza Shevakiva. So these 4 dates with the regular dates, Ha'Reilim Mutarim, it's not to be a form of kilayim. We go Be'emus Sukenes, an animal which is in danger. Now, the reason why, so in the old days they weren't so into this health thing. They had an animal which was dying, so they slaughtered it so they could chop and rind and eat it, right? So, famous kenes lo yishchot elen kenu der yochol lechol mimena kizayis slimi bod yom. Because unless you have enough time to actually consume a kizayis of it roasted, obviously it's the quickest way to cook it. You don't have to salt it, right? But before Yom Tov ends. Even if you get a raw kazayis, steak tartare, out of the neck, which is available to you most readily, that's okay. Shachta b'sadeh, if you shechted the animal out in the field, lo yivena b'moit v'mota, it doesn't pass to bring it in, carry it on a rod, on a stick, because that's like uvda d'chol. So you carry things in a weekday. Rather, we bring it limb by limb, so as not to make a zilzun covered yontif. You bring it steak by steak and put it out in the field and bring it back like that. Okay? Excuse me. Rabbi Rabban, name of the rabbis in Bavel, said, "Shachta v'chu ze'evim b'nei me'ah." What happens if you shechted an animal out in the field, and wolves came and ate its lungs? In this specific case, it's innards, but here it means the lungs. Is what concerns kishela. He didn't do b'dika on the lungs, right? He didn't check them to see if they're kosher. So we say shechetzkas b'nei me'ayim l'kosher. We assume lungs are mostly kosher, right?
Those are the good old days.
No. Even today, if you can't check, you assume it's kosher, because the majority is kosher. But it's the takanat the rabbanan, as long as you have the lungs specifically to check it. The chosh lomar. Why are we not afraid? Shemaniklu. Maybe they have a hole. Now, this actually is talking about the reason why this is pertinent to our Mishnah is, as Rabbi Akiva said in our Mishnah, that you can chap a rind and eat a kazayis from the base hashchita raw. Why does he not make you check the lung first? Right? Just like the question b'chash lomar is really going both on the case where you lost the lung to wolves, and the case of Rabbi Akiva where he says just chap a rind and take kazayis from the base hashchita without checking the lung. Why is that? So it says more cheskas b'nei me'ayim ksherim, because we assume that in most cases it's Torah. Again, if we can, it's kosher. If we can, we check. If we cannot, then we're not makbid. The famous case which we've discussed in the past about that is Korban Pesach, right? Erev Pesach, who had time to check all the reyes, so they just let it go and all assume that all the animals are kosher. Okay? Says the Gemara, considering the last one, now you want to bring back, obviously when you slaughter an animal out of the field, it's very important to you to get the hide back to civilization, because the hide is worth a lot of money. So how do you bring the hide back? You leave, when you're skinning the animal in order to get out the meat, you leave one limb attached to the hide. And that actually allows you to carry the hide, because now the hide becomes tafel to the limb, and that's how you get everything in without being mezalzel and covered yontif. See, we have eitzes for everything. Halach down. Bechor shenaf al labor. A bechor fell down into a well on yontif. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer yered mumche. Well, of course, the bechor, when it's in its pristine state, you can't do anything with it. It has to be a korban, right? So Rabbi Yehuda Omer yered mumche. An expert can go down. V'yirim yesh bo mum. You should see if it has a mum, in which case you're allowed to take it up and slaughter it. And if not, lo yishchot, you may not slaughter it. You only slaughter it, you have to go down and see if there's a mum. If there's no mum, you have to leave it down for after yontif. Shimon said a very big chumrah, unless the mum was recognizable from before yontif began, it's not going to be repaired, and you can't eat it on yontif. B'chavish does Rabbi Yehuda. So I have a question, Rabbi Yehuda. The Tintam we learned during Sechta Shabbos. Rabbi Yehuda Omer im lois on available of Shabbos asura. If it wasn't available from before Shabbos begins, and an animal drops dead on Shabbos, you can't feed it to your dogs. When it was alive, it was not considered to be edible by dogs, and now that it's dead, it became prepared on Shabbos. It's forbidden. So says Gemara, Rabbi Vachu Marachain. I understand. So how here can Rabbi Yehuda say that you can the animal which did not have a mum before Yontif, when it falls down into the well or the pit on Yontif, you can check it as a mum, right? It wasn't prepared for anything for Yontif. So it says the Gemara, a very interesting answer. Rabbi Yehuda kedaite. Rabbi Yehuda follows his own reasoning. Rabbi Yehuda Omar eina mumche Torah. You don't need a mumche d'oraisa. Now, the way the Korban explains this, really it had a mum from before Yontif began. Just that we needed to get an expert mum seer in order to pass and that it's mutter, right? But Rabbi Yehuda holds it's not essential to have a mumche. It's just that mumchim usually know best. The experts know best, so that's why you call an expert. But really, any plain guy can say it's mutter, that it's not a bechor because it's got a mum. So therefore, the fact that a mum before Yontif suffices, even though no expert came actually to see if it had a valid mum or not, because that's already considered to be beginning the process. For Yontif, that's okay. Okay, so it's already to be muchan.
Doesn't that open up to a lot of...
Oh, sure. The Maisa, we have to, despite that, be makbir on an expert, but that's not the Ikar Adin. The Ikar Adin is hypothetical, you don't need an expert. Rabbi Yehuda b'shem Rabbi Abba said to Rabbi Yehuda, our Mishnah is like Rabbi Yehuda said a fascinating thing. Of course it is Rabbi Yehuda, but it's like another Rabbi Yehuda who said an amazing thing. He said that looking at a mum on a b'chor is like looking at the trephus on an animal. But when you slaughter an animal, you're allowed to check it. If you have a shiur of trephus, so you check it, right, to see if it's not a treif or not. Does the fact that you have a shiur of trephus make it now not food? And muktzah, no. Because it's a shiur. It doesn't change its status, it's a shiur. Right? So too, Rabbi Yehuda said an amazing thing. He said that a bechor is really food. Just that right now it doesn't have a mum. So when it has the mum, you go and ask the shiur on the mum. But it's not that previously to that it wasn't food. So therefore the pasking on the mum is like pasking on treif. It doesn't change the status of the animal. Whatever the status of the animal was, it still is and still will be. The question there, however, is just then becomes a peripheral one. Can you paskin on the animal on Yontif? And of course one can paskin on an animal on Yontif. Just like you take a chicken to the rough to see if it's kosher treif. I can take also this behemoth to the mumche, the expert, to see if it's a valid mum or not. So it's psak and not hachona. The animal should be muchan even when it's a b'chor, because everybody's looking forward to the time when it gets a mum. But it has to be a special psak that it has the mum, just like you have to pass the treifas mutter. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda asked on this. The mai midivrayim. If that's the case, let's say the following svara. The mai is the rabbanan to take trumas and meiser off questionable commodities, even though most amaratzim take meiser off. It's halacha the rabbanan. For yes treifa midivrayim, and checking out a treifa is also midrabanan. Now it doesn't mean checking out a treifa. Checking out a treifa, it's mamish treifa is toraisa. It means to check the lungs. To check the lungs in the shlachtos in the slaughterhouse, that's a drabanan, right? Because midiraisa rely on rov. So if that's the case, the kavasam arfishis a kamad atamar roim as a treifa. You just said we can paskin on lungs on yontif. So too the kavasam arfishis said my be yontif. Let's be able to take off the maya and yontif as well. One's a Rabban, the other's Rabban, let's be matir both. Now the Gemara doesn't answer, but one could give a very simple answer, which is obviously that being Roas HaTreifa doesn't involve any Maisa to make it better. Whereas taking off the Mai is, of course, a Tikkun. So obviously one can answer one and not the other, very simply. But the Yerushalmi just ends with the Kasha, it doesn't explain what the difference is. Okay?
Well, we've had that come up before.
You can't take off the Mai in Yotzes.
Right.
Right. The question is, why not? If you can check out along, why can you take off the Mai? So that's what one has to distinguish. The Gemara itself doesn't bother distinguishing. That's all I'm saying. Okay? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yisrael said, Kol shemumo nikar mi erev yontif. Any time there was a mum which was recognizable for him before yontif began, v'loitir mumcha will be yontif, but a mumcha did not take a look at it until yontif. Ain't semina mumcha. It's not to be repaired, not like we've been saying till now. It's not to be repaired, and therefore you can't slaughter it on a yontif. V'atani, I don't understand. What about the following brisa which said, Egel b'chor shenola min ha-treifa. If you have an egel, a calf, which is a b'chor, shenola min ha-treifa, which came out of a mother who's a treifa, b'yontiv it's mutter. On yontiv it's mutter. How does it become mutter? It wasn't prepared. Its mother wasn't prepared because its mother was a treifa and was certainly not designated to be food. So how's the kid prepared? It must be that the kid is prepared because you don't need hachana, right? You don't need to be making the b'chor independently, regardless of whether it's muchan or not. It's mutter, like we said previously. So why is it saying that it has to be muchan? So says the Gemara, tipater shavar mumchevro. Cop out answer. It's so about a case where the calf was seen just before Yontif. Even though it wasn't yet fully born, I guess it was in the process of being born. It was seen as it being born, and you saw a mum, and that's why it's mutter. Okay? Which is very difficult, but that's what I want to say, that already was mucha mi bod yom, was prepared already from before Yom to begin. Says the Gemara, Asa uvto kum Rabbi Yami, with a mice came in front of Rabbi Yami with a bechor. The son of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda wanted Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda is the one who's Mako. Rabbi Shimon is the one who's Machmir. Look at Rabbi Yehuda. We can make it like Rabbi Yehuda, and that means that a bechor gets a mum, even on Yontif one can eat it. I said Rabbi Yishia Masnisa the Bar Kapara Midraima. So Rabbi Yishia brought a Mishnah from Bar Kapara in the south. Vitana, actually a brisa. Vitana says Chachar min kol shemumo nikar mi erev Yontif lo yitir mumchel bi Yontif. A case that is a mum, which is recognized before Yontif, but a mumche only came, an expert only came to Yontif, ain't semina muchon. It's not prepared like Rabbi Shimon who's machmir. It's not to be fully prepared yet. And for Chazer Bay, he reneged from his intention to pass like Rabbi L'Kula, he passed Rabbi Shimon L'Chumra. Okay, now the next story really is not relevant to here. It just got schlepped in because there's some similarities. Also, this notion of labor. You have a mother and child calves or cows which fell into a bore. So the halacha is you can't check them both on the same day, right? Right? So since it's not the same day, what do? You can't take both out of the bore because they're muktzah. The only reason you can take both one out of the bore is because you want to eat it. But you certainly can't take both out of the bore, so what do? So Rabbi Lezer Omer Yalsa Misham Nasli. You take out the first one with the intent, the full intent, of shechting it, right? For lo yishchot, don't shecht it. For yarin, then make a ruse. For yalas Hasheni, and take up the second one and say, whoops, I didn't really want the first one, I wanted the second one. So that's harama, that's a ruse for getting them both up out of the bore, right? I skipped, didn't I? I read Rabbi Shua first. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Rabbi Lezer may Yalas Rishon Nas Lishchot v'Yishchot. Lezer says you have to take the first one that comes to your hand up and slaughter it. Vashem said which not allowed now to slaughter it because it's either the son or the mother of the one which was slaughtered. It's not allowed to be slaughtered on the same day. Oslo Parnosim in Komashlo Yomus, you toss down straw and hay into it to eat down in the pit that it shouldn't die by the time you're allowed to take it out during the next weekday. Rabbi Shua Me'er Yalas Arisha. Rabbi Shua is the one who says you make a ruse. Take the first one out to with the intent to shecht it, but don't shecht it and say, whoops, I wanted the second one. For Yarim Yalas Hasheni, and then you take up the second one. Even though it was all the rules, your intent was only to slaughter one of them regardless, mutter nonetheless remains permissible.
What does Rav Shiur do with the first cow that's been taken up?
Leave it on. Oh no.
Leave it roam?
Oh great, it's on the rim of the boar, right? So just leave it roam, right? In the corral, wherever. Don't push it back, right? That'll defeat the ruse. Rabbi Bumar asks, Rabbi Lezer seems to contradict himself. Tamnu Omer Mutal Harim by Chala on Erev Pesach, or Pesach itself. Yeah, the problem is that if you separate Chala from the dough, as you're supposed to, so it's going to rise. It's Erev Pesach, it's on Pesach itself. It's going to rise. So if it rises, it becomes chametz. So if it's Erev Pesach, you can burn it, but if it's Pesach, you can't burn it. So what do? So Rabbi Yeshua says, just take it off, and if it rises, it's not your problem. It's challah; it doesn't belong to you anymore.
Cold water.
Yeah, he gives the possibility of putting in cold water. Rabbi Elazar, however, says that what you do is you bake the whole thing, because you don't designate challah until it's over, right? Till it's in the oven. Once the oven say, oh, that part I want to be challah. And then, of course, at that point, you leave it in the oven so it burns to a crisp and never becomes chametz, right? So that's a ruse, because technically you're supposed to take challah off from the dough, not from the dough and separate it, not just designate it. So that's a ruse. But there, Rabbi Lezer allows you to use the ruse. Here he doesn't. What's the difference, right? Here it says it's forbidden. The reason why there allows you to is because otherwise he thinks you're going to transgress by raw by matzah. Now not literally, because it's not your chal anymore, right? It belongs to the kohanim. But since you're going to have chametz in your midst, and that's a bad thing, so if we say do it up front before it becomes chametz, right? Here, why was he not making? Why did he not allow a ruse? B'chavish does Rabbi Shua, similarly Rabbi Shua it's difficult. Tamar Amar Asarim, but Chali says you got to take it off before you put it in the oven, not afterwards. And if it becomes chametz, maybe it becomes chametz, but you can't do arama. But here he says mutalarim in terms of the osov espino, you can take them both up one at a time. So how do we reconcile two positions? Rabbi said, "Kan shvus v'kan chiyuv chatos." By taking animals up on Yontiv, it's only nisut rabbanon, muktzah. Right? Animals are muktzah to rabbanon, so nishkafel rabbanon can be mekel. But over there, we're taking off challah from dough. Challah from dough is a chiyuv daraisos. Therefore, you have to do it the proper way, right? So it says, I'm ready. But the tevel also is no chatos because they're both misa. Well, Yontiv is not even misa; it's malchus. And tevel is misa b'dei shamayim. So there's no chiyuv chatas. But what it means is there's a potential capital penalty. The capital penalty would be either misa b'dei shamayim in case if you ate something which is untithed, or you get I don't know if it's misa, it's not b'dei shamayim, but you have malchus, right? Transgress a law if it's yontif. So amen. So they didn't allow you to do the rules because it's a more severe issue. Rabbi Ezra here let you do the rules for the bottom line. Welcome back. In order to save Jewish money, right? It's like calf dying of wear down there. How are we going to good veal? How can we let it, just become die? So Tam Ma'isel remain, but over there, so the challah become chametz. It's no big loss anyway. No coin eats challah bisman. So what's the big deal? Rabbi Yitzhak Yeshur Chad Kadein, Rabbi Yitzhak Chad Kadein. One of them held like Rav Edi, I forget what Rav Edi says, and one says like Rabbi Yossi Barbun. Where are these names? Where were these names? I don't see these names. Oh, Kanch was Kan Chiv Chatas. One said distinction between one is Rabban and one's Daraisa. And one said, like Rabbi Yossi Rabun, the distinction is that one place where makbid on the money of Jews, that's by those of us know, but Bechal is no money to be makbid on. Okay, Be'em Moshe Mesa. An animal which dies loses its enemy and coming out to move from its place. Ma'isa shesholus are meir aleh valachala shenit meis. Rabbi Tarfon, sorry, not Rabbi Meir. Once asked Rabbi Tarfon about an animal that died, can you move it? And about a chala which became tummy, can you move it? Nichlas Beitza medrash shol, and he asked, Amrlo, he said, lo yizim nikoyim, not allowed to. Shmuel Amar tol chamishas kainim, they're all wrong. Shaur Rabbi Tarfon Balua that he can't move the animal. Because halacha is that all animals, even ones that are dropped dead, are considered to be muchan for clothing. Because you always have in the back of your mind that if I can't use it for any other purpose, I'll use it to feed the dogs. Okay? Amrab Masta Bivchorabuta. No. The fathers came right, because it wasn't talking about a regular animal, which if it drops, they can give to the dogs. It was a Bechor. Bechor, if it drops dead, it retains its kedusha, so it couldn't be fed to the dogs. So you had to wait it out. You had to wait out till the end of Yom Tov. You couldn't move it on Yom Tov because it was muktzah, the bechor. What you going to do with it? You can't even feed it to the dogs, so therefore you have to wait it out. We have a brayso which indicates this. It says Alev chala shenit meis. It's our Mishnah, not a brayso. It says that it and chala shekain tummy can't move. Mazu kodesh is like chala is holy. Abzu, so to the animal which dies is kodesh, must be bechor. Now, boom, Levi, that's probably Levi fast. Same question. Milos is a treifa by Zofil. Can you look at a treifa, paskin if it's treif, check the lungs in a dark room? Amrisa said, no, la'apik labar, you have to take it outside. So interesting, I saw the Yerushalmi Beitza brings down halacha l'maisa, one can't check the night. Why? So you have to check the rays by the light of the day.
I thought they do with feeling.
There's b'dikas pnim and b'dikas chutz. B'dikas pnim is with feeling, b'dikas chutz when they take it out and visually examine it.
They blow it up.
They don't always have to blow it up. They have to examine it if they have a chashash, and sometimes they blow it up. But in any event, so there's also such a thing by maras nida. When a woman has a blood stain, so you're not supposed to look at it at night, especially not by incandescent light, because it changes the color. Right? White light actually, fluorescent light is not so bad, but incandescent light actually makes things look redder. So I was told once, first time I learned about this, that women are very makpid when they wear makeup to find out the lighting, the places where they go, so they know what kind. I've seen not all women, but some women, to know exactly what makeup is matim to what kind of lighting. Okay, that's how we make shalosana yisha. Okay, so in any event. So here too, you can't look at the treifa in a dark room. Here, even the Carbonet says candles are good enough, but it has to be either natural light or something equivalent to that. And again, candles are not so good for nida, as I told you, because it gives everything a reddish tinge. You prefer fluorescent light. I think people like Rabbi First have special fluorescent lights in their study to look at maras because of that. Okay, so name it. So says Gemara. Wait a minute. Ravi boy, yes, like this. Come on. Shaman, I've heard, can't look to see if it's saras in a dark room. Shamina, Shaman, did you ever hear such a thing? They now have to look at a treif in a dark house? Nobody ever heard such a thing? Says Gemara, Rabbi Yisrael, Lomi Atam, the truth is, that Rabbi Levi said, don't look in the dark house. You're right, it's not because of the dark. It's because Elashema Timotzi Treifa, because maybe it's a yontif and you'll find that the animal's taka treif, but also you'll have to be stuck with a dead animal in your house over yontif. So ever take it out first, because he held, like the Tan and our Mishnah holds, that you're not allowed to move it on yontif, right? Asid Ramasel Shemol, so Ramasel, like Shemol, you can move it. And that's why he said, our Mishnah about Bechor. With the Levi, he holds that even a regular animal you can't move, Kirav, and that's like Rav who said that you can't move a regular animal which dropped dead, it's on Yontif, drops dead in Yontif. Rabbi Yehuda B'Shem Shmuel said, Halacha Rabbi Yehuda, Halacha Rabbi Yehuda, that if it wasn't available from before Shabbos, even though it drops dead on Shabbos, when it drops dead on Shabbos, you can't move it, it's not going to be Muchan in the Klavim, since it wasn't designated for that purpose from before. Yontif began, or Shabbos began, and therefore you have to leave it where it falls on Shabbos or Yontif, unless of course you did like Levi and you were smart, you took it out before you looked at it. First move it, then ask us questions later.
Yeah, but when you move it, it's not moving. So
yeah, but you don't know yet if it's treif or not. So therefore, it's aroma. It's the same thing we had aroma previously. Hey, we're very good at loopholes. We specialize in loopholes.